All right, welcome everyone. I'm Christopher Locke. I'm the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services, and we're doing this webinar series called Get to Know Your IBPA Member Benefits because we want to give our members an in-depth look at all of our member benefits, which we have a lot of, we know, and some of them are a little more complicated and they're really amazing, and we want to make sure you understand how to use them. Today, I'm very excited. We're going to be covering the benefit for MetaComet. So I'm happy to introduce our speaker today. MetaComet Systems President and Co-Founder, David Marlin. Hello, sir.
Hi, Christopher. Thank you very much. So, pull up my screen. Thank you all for joining us. It's great to be here. We've been a member of the IBPA for many years. So I want to, we're talking about today, the stresses and efficiencies around royalties. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about our very first customer and how I got started in this business. This was back in 1999. Our very first customer was a company called eReads. Many of you may have heard of them. They were kind of one of the, some might consider the pioneer in the ebook world. I had been doing consulting for them in other areas, and the owner came to me and said, we are drowning in royalties. Those were his words. Their bookkeeper was spending several weeks every quarter doing royalties. And he asked me, can you help us develop a spreadsheet to calculate royalties? They were really stressed out and it was taking them forever. So, Richard Curtis was the, many of you have been, if you've been in publishing for more than 10 or 15 years, you may recognize that name. He asked me to look at the problem. So I said, sure, I'll check it out, Richard. And I started studying the problem and I saw, okay, we need to calculate a percentage of the revenue that comes in. That should be pretty straightforward. We need to pay out every quarter. That should be pretty straightforward. And we need to have a nice presentation to the author so they have confidence in the results and it's easy for them to understand. So I thought to myself, okay, yeah, we can probably do this in a spreadsheet. But as I started to look into it, I very quickly realized that even if there's minimal complexity and more than a handful of titles, it really can't be done that well in a spreadsheet. And if you try, it's going to take forever and it's going to create the same anxieties that eReads was experiencing when they first started this back in 1999. And by the way, Christopher mentioned that I'm the co-founder of MetaComet. Richard is the other co-founder of MetaComet, Richard Curtis from eReads. So a little bit of an aside, after we got this royalty system going, he and I decided to turn it into a business and build a business around it. So we have just under an hour together, and during this time, I'd like to answer 5 questions for you. So the first is, why are royalties so stressful? Then we'll talk about, we'll answer the question, how do I eliminate that stress and effort? Next, is it worth the effort to get royalties automated? And if you do get them automated, how do you know it will do what I say it will? And what will it do for you and what are the benefits? And then finally, can you afford it? We'll talk at the end a little bit about your member benefit as an IBPA member with MetaComet. I will be switching back and forth between the presentations and just the video of me, because I like to be able to try to make it a little more personal and speak to you directly. And also, as Christopher mentioned, as I go through this, any questions that pop up, please stick them in the Q&A section, and I'll pause a couple times as we progress to answer any questions you may have. So we come to question number 1. Why is it that royalties are so stressful? Oops. Sorry about that. I am. Oh, there we go. Share screen. So why is it that royalties are so stressful? So there's a lot of different elements to royalties. So if we go back to eReads, I realized, talking to them that, they have titles with multiple authors. So that's a complexity. And you need to split the royalties between them. And as I looked at it, I was like, oh, okay, that makes it a little more difficult. There's different rates depending on how the book was sold, what kind of book it was. Is it a physical book? Is it an ebook? Was it sold through one channel? Was it sold at a deep discount? Then there's the issue of advances and getting those recouped over a period of time. And then also, let's just say an author only earns 50 cents in a quarter or a month or a year, depending on how often you're paying royalties. Do you really want to send them a check for 25 cents? Do they really want to get a check for 25 cents? Sometimes, but more often than not, it costs a couple dollars typically to even process a check. So it's not really worth sending that out. So how do you carry those balances to forward if you don't pay it out? Are you holding back reserves against returns? So when you put all of this together, you end up with massive complexity, and that complexity is really it yields stress. So I want to tell you another story. This is a customer that we had a few years ago. So they signed on with us about a month after going through, getting them set up. One of the steps in getting a customer set up is we do what's called a parallel run. So some of our customers are starting from scratch, but if you're not, we'll run a prior period or two of royalties and compare them to what you had paid out so that you can validate the results. So we gave them the prior period royalty statements, and they looked at them and got back to us and said something's wrong. All the numbers are off. So we were very concerned. Is there something wrong with Royalty Tracker? In our experience, there pretty rarely is in the calculations. But anytime we hear somebody say the calculations don't look right, we do get concerned. So we dug in and we verified everything was correct. So we asked them to validate their prior statements. And they did their own validation, and they realized that their statements were wrong. So they asked, they went back another period and asked us to do another period of statements, and they realized that those statements were wrong. They were all wrong. And we went back another period, and eventually they came to the realization that they had never paid out royalties accurately in their whole existence. So yes, it is possible to do this with Excel, but this is why it's so stressful. It's because you just don't know that you're doing it right, and it's so complex, and it takes it just takes forever. So the second question I told you I would address today is, how do you eliminate the stress and effort? The answer is through automation. And at MetaComet, what we offer you is the freedom from doing this in Excel and all the associated challenges, or doing it in a system that's not really designed for this. In my experience, this is the only way to eliminate the stress and effort of doing royalties, is to automate them. And in the words of one of our customers, Royalty Trackers made it possible for the first time in my independent press's 20-year history for us to process royalty statements hassle-free and error-free. And this is a typical customer who was stressed out about their royalties, again, because they just weren't sure, are we doing it right? And as that other publisher I talked about shared, they, you just don't know. They had thought they were always doing it right, and you just don't know. And to my knowledge, we are the only company that specializes in just doing royalties. There's other companies out there that have royalty modules as part of a bigger system, but that's really what they are. They're an afterthought. We specialize in just royalties. So now let's get to the third question. Is it worth the effort to automate? So the question to that really boils down to how do you value your time? So like many of you, I run a business, and I've come to learn that there's little in the business that's as valuable as my time. And I think that's the case for most business owners. They don't always accept it or realize it, but their time is extremely valuable. Your time is extremely valuable. And it's really hard to put a number on it, but just as a kind of rule of thumb, if you're running $1 million business, you can easily make the case that your time is worth at least $500 an hour. And likely it's worth much more than that. You know, even if you're running a business, you know, if your business is $100,000 a year, your time is worth, you know, it's probably worth at least $100 an hour. You know, and again, most people running their businesses undervalue their own time. So how much time are you spending every month consolidating your sales and calculating royalties? You know, we have worked with customers that were spending a whole week every month. You know, they had monthly royalties. A number of IBPA members do monthly royalties. We work with a lot of IBPA members. I would say that's not the most common one. You know, I'd say quarterly is probably the most common for IBPA members, maybe semi-annual, but a bunch of you guys do monthly royalties. If you're spending 1 week every month, that's a quarter of your time doing that. We have customers that were doing semi-annual royalties, and they were spending 3 months every 6 months just to do royalties. They had one or more people just doing royalties for 3 months every 6 months. So that's half of the year, 6 months a year, they were doing royalties. Is that time worth the effort to automate it? If you can reduce that time by 90%, is that, you know, worth the effort? And related to that is, so how much time is it going to take you to get up and running? So for Royalty Tracker, for our system, it'll take you, so we'll spend about 10 hours, typically less than that, in training and meetings. There's 4 hours of training, and there's usually a weekly meeting we'll do with you. So usually you'll spend about 10 hours in training and meetings. It usually takes about, if in the worst case scenario, we can't import any of your data, which is unusual. Usually we can import at least some of it. But in the worst case scenario, it'll take you about 3 minutes a title to enter in to get set up. Usually, you know, so 50 titles is usually about 2.5 hours. If you do it entirely manually, which again, that's pretty unlikely. I think that's pretty conservative. And then you'll probably spend about 5, maybe 10 hours at the most testing and validating the results, because you know, we make it really easy for you to do that. So you know, you're probably looking at an investment of, I would say, a maximum of about 20 hours to get up and running, and usually you'll spread that out over a period of 3 months. So you know, maybe it's a couple hours a week for 3 months that you're spending getting royalties, getting your royalties automated. So So the next question that I said I'd answer today for you is will it? How do we know it'll do what you say it does? So what I'd like to do for that is to just show you how it works. So when you log into Royalty Tracker, there's really 4 parts to managing royalties. There's your contracts, your sales data, having reports that can help you determine that your data is accurate and help you understand what the impact of royalties are to your business. And then there's also your royalty statements, getting those sent out at the end of your royalty period. So you first go into Royalty Tracker, we call them projects, but they're really just titles. So you'll have a list of all your titles here on the left and just some high level information. So if your company happens to have different imprints, we call those business units in Royalty Tracker. You can associate the title with a different imprint. Usually you'll set up what's called the minimum payment threshold. That's the amount that the author has to earn before you'll send them a payment. And then you'll set the frequency. So it can be monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual. Those are the really only 4 possibilities. We actually have seen people do them every other month, but I've only seen that once in the 23 years I've been doing royalty. So it's always one of those 4. So you set up the high level title information. So then once you have your title set up, the next step, so here we're looking at this title called the Guide to Simple Royalty Management, is you set up all the ISBNs and other product identifiers. So some of you, if you use a lot of IBPA members work through KDP, sometimes you won't even bother getting an ISBN, you'll just use the Amazon ASIN number, that's fine. So you just use the product ID. It's usually an ISBN, but often not. And you list all the product IDs, all the ISBNs that you have for that given title here. So, and then for each ISBN, usually the only thing you really need to enter is the ISBN number and the format. Is it audio, is it ebook, is it hardcover, paperback? And you can have your own different format types here. You can set this list up. So some people might just have physical and digital, or some people might just have digital. You might just have one format that you work with. So whatever formats you work with, you can set that up. All this other information here is often nice to have, but it's almost always optional. Sometimes the price matters, sometimes the manufacturing cost matters, but it's almost always optional. So here you have a list of your ISBNs. And the reason this is important, because when your sales data comes in, if you picture your sales data as a spreadsheet, every single row in that spreadsheet is going to have an ISBN associated with it. And this way, when you import that into Royalty Tracker, it knows exactly what title that ISBN belongs to. So next, it can apply the appropriate royalty rules. And this is where you set up the various royalty rules. So on the left, you'll have a list of all of your royalty recipients. And you can have an unlimited number of royalty recipients. Often it's just one. We have had customers with as many as 300 royalty recipients. That's pretty unusual. Usually it's 1 or 2, maybe 3. And then for each royalty recipient, you set up the royalty rules here. Now, we're finding that Royalty Tracker can handle pretty much any kind of royalty rule right out of the box. It's very rare that we come across a rule that we can't handle. And that's because we've been doing this for 23 years. And we also work with about 200 publishers. So we've seen most of what there is to see when it comes to different royalty rules. So just to give you an example, a lot of our customers have different rules based on the format. We call those revenue types. What type of sale is this that triggers a certain percentage to be paid out? Within those revenue types, you might have what some people call tiers or escalators or sliding scales. So this is showing you that for ebook sales, for units 1 to 1,000, we're going to pay 10% of the net, 10% of the amount that we receive. For ebook sales 1,001 and above, and we use the 0 to indicate no upper limit, we're going to pay 25% of the net, 25% of what we receive. You can also base this on the list price, on the sale price, or you can pay a flat per unit rate. So $1.10 per book, for example. You can base these tiers or escalators on dollars, units, discount levels. So for book sales between 70 and 90% discount, you might pay a different rate. And there's all kinds of ways that can work too. Sometimes it's rare, but sometimes we'll see for a specific ISBN, you pay a different rate. So we had this one example of this one book that was a really expensive version of a book. And so the author and the publisher negotiated a different, it was like a collector's item version of the book. So the author and the publisher negotiated a specific royalty just for that one edition. So we could put the product ID in there. You can base it on some we're hiding some fields in here just to simplify, but you can base it on pay one rate, for ebooks that are sold through Amazon, and pay a different rate for ebooks that are sold through Kobo, for instance. So that's just some of those are the kind of most basic contract complexities that Royalty Tracker can handle. This box down here, if you were to scroll further down this window in the actual app, you'd see reserves against returns. So a lot of our customers hold back reserves against returns. A lot of them don't, because they don't have, this is one of the areas where it's really easy to make mistakes. If you do have a clause, if you're selling physical books that are not POD typically, so if you're doing a print run, usually, a bookstore will order a bunch of books and they have the right to return those books in most cases. So a lot of publishers hold back a reserve against returns in case they get, next period, they get more returns than sales, but they've already paid out the royalties. So they hold back some of those royalties. If you're doing that, that is so hard to not make a mistake on if you're doing that in Excel. But with Royalty Tracker, we can totally automate that process for you. So the next area is what we call the adjustment. So things like advances. So if you have an advance, you can enter that advance here, and then Royalty Tracker will automatically recoup against that advance. Sometimes you might have deductions. So there's pre-royalty deductions, like a lot of quote unquote hybrid publishers will take out like marketing costs and editing costs and pay royalties on what's left. And then there's post-royalty deductions. So maybe you'll agree with your author, hey, your author might ask you for an index because they're really proud of their book and they just really think it'd be cool for it to have an index, even though it won't impact sales at all. They just want it in there. You might agree, okay, we'll take that out of your royalties. Maybe they need a wire transfer and they'll agree to take that out of their royalties. So these are adjustments. So any type of adjustment that you put in that impacts royalties, you just add to this screen here. So I see some questions coming in, which is great. I will keep asking them. I'm going to pause in just a couple minutes to see if to answer those. But if you have any questions, please put them right in the QA section. So let's keep going. So the next part. So once you've got all your royalty rules in, really it's not even difficult, but this is the most time-consuming part of getting set up with automation, is getting all these royalty rules in place. Once you have those in place, the rest of the process going forward is super simple. Getting your sales into the system then is the next challenge. Now, some of you might work with a distributor, or you might get all your sales from Amazon, so you just have one sales file that you have to deal with every month. That's easy. You can just upload that right into Royalty Tracker. Many of you probably work with multiple different distributors and digital retailers, like you might work with Audible, Amazon, Apple, Google, LSI. And in those cases, you could be receiving several. We have customers that we have one customer I was just talking with internally today with someone here at MetaComet that has 100 different sales files that they import every month, 100 different formats. And they all, as you guys know from dealing with this, they all are different. Some of them are Excel, some of them are CSV, they all have different information, different columns. So consolidating all that sales data, sometimes they're in different currencies. Consolidating all that sales data can be a real headache. So it's interesting. We created this sales aggregator. If any of you have seen our tools before, you'll see that these are all new versions of it. We rebuilt all our tools back in 2021 from the ground up. So if you're used to the older sales aggregator, the reason I bring that up is because we had a customer back in like 2016 say, David, we're struggling with all these sales files. Can you guys just build us something that will help us consolidate them? So we just kind of whipped something up And then we put a Band-Aid on it and another Band-Aid on it. And we built it up into this kind of, it worked, but it was kind of this big complex piece of spaghetti code. So we rebuilt it from scratch a few years ago. And this is the new sales area with everything we learned. So this, you basically set up what we call a template for each type of sale that you deal with. And then once you have those templates set up, all you have to do is just, you'll get them every month. We'll recommend that you just stick all those sales files in a folder. And then at the end of the month, you just drag them one at a time onto the sales aggregator. We'll automatically rearrange all the columns. We'll do the currency conversion. We know how many rows at the top have to be skipped. We know that you have to skip the rows that are total rows. Even those of you who are familiar with the ACX file, it's probably the ugliest of all the sales files that you guys have to deal with. That's the Audible file. That file is just a nightmare to handle, but the sales aggregator can handle it. You just import it into the sales aggregator and it'll just dissect it apart. And then, for each one, each file that you've ever imported will show you the file when you imported it. We'll show you how many rows, if we detected any errors or issues with the file, how many units, and the dollar amount of the file. And then you can also download, we'll keep a copy of the original file for you. You can delete it if you made a mistake, didn't mean to import it for some reason. And then we'll also let you download it in our version, the MetaComet version, so all your data is the same from all those different files, like the ISBNs in the first column, the dates in the second column. I don't remember exactly how it's all set up, but we'll take all those files over in all these different formats and just have them in one consolidated sales file for you, which you can use however you want. We actually have several customers that just use the sales aggregator and don't actually use the royalty tool, because this was really by far their biggest problem. So I am going to pause here and just, Christopher, do we have any questions that have come in so far?
So one question someone had was, does Royalty Tracker automatically remit the actual payment to the author or illustrator, or just email them the royalty statement?
That's a really good question. And I'm glad you asked that. We just calculate the amount that's due, and then we give you an Excel file or a CSV file that you can stick into a payment system. So some people pay through their bank. Some banks let you upload our payment file, or it's easy. We have a bunch of different versions of the file, and we can get one to work with any system that you can just upload to your bank. Some people use QuickBooks for their payments, and we have a version of the file that goes right into QuickBooks. So you can just ingest it into QuickBooks. More and more companies are using, I wouldn't say it's at the majority, but we're seeing a lot more of this using payment processing systems. So we partner with a company called Topalti, really cool platform. I'd be happy to put you in touch with them if you'd like, where we basically send them all the email addresses, because we'll typically have that for all your authors. They'll then send out an email to all your authors saying, hey, welcome on behalf of such and such press. We're going to pay you electronically. How would you like to get paid? And what are your account numbers? If you want to get paid by PayPal, what's your PayPal account number? You want to get paid through direct deposit or ACH or EFT, what's your bank account information? And they handle all the security. They're responsible for that. Because one problem, so, if you're doing electronic payments through a system like even a QuickBooks, you've got to somehow get your author's banking information. And that is the only way to do that securely is over the phone, because emailing it, that's not secure. So someone can intercept that email. We've done whole separate. I'm a mild expert on security, and I've done webinars for IBPA and security, and I'd be happy to do more if it's ever desired. But that's not a secure way of transmitting that highly sensitive information. Someone can intercept that and cause all kinds of damage. So a system like Topalti does it securely. And then we just send the payment information right to Topalti. They pull it out of your bank account and then pay the authors however they want to be paid, by check, by PayPal, by direct deposit. So that's the very long answer to the question of, we don't do the payments directly, but we can work with any system that does the payments for you.
And someone else is asking, is this software web-based, or is it a software, or like Like where does it exist?
Yeah, so this is all web-based. It's all hosted on Amazon AWS. So all you need is a simple browser, and it works with pretty much any browser. We test it on all the major browsers, so it's really easy to access. And I saw someone ask a little bit about, is it MetaComet or Royalty Tracker? Well, that's a great question. The product is so. Our company is called MetaComet. We have Royalty Tracker, that's the main royalty calculation product. We have the Sales Aggregator. I'm going to show you this other tool we have called the Author Portal or the Royalty Portal, but everyone typically just calls us MetaComet. So you can just refer to everything we do as MetaComet.
So,
Any others?
yeah, so a question that people have with something like, checking royalties is that comment, that the idea of a threshold. So once person's asking, well, how many authors should they have, or do they need to have to make it, if you will, like worth it, like setting up with like a system like this, if they have two authors or 50, like what's that number that it's like, okay, you really need to start like signing up with Royalty Tracker and MetaComet.
Yeah, that's another really good question. So as who's ever asking this question is probably noticing that as they get more titles and more authors, it's getting more and more complex. What we find is most publishers can handle this without automation, with like 5 to 10 titles without too much trouble. We kind of see the threshold where the stress levels start to really spike and the efficiency start to really be an issue at about 15 to 20 titles. That said, we have a lot of companies that started at ground zero. We have many companies that we work with, many of which are IBPA members, that they just knew they were going to be successful. And actually, Royalties was the first system they implemented because they'd been publishers before and they knew that Royalties was going to be the most something they just didn't want to deal with and time consuming. So we have some customers that start with 0 titles. One that I can think of off the top of my head is Levine Carito, the children's book publisher. Arthur Levine came from Scholastic. He knew the very first system he bought. Now they're very successful. The very first system he bought was Royalty Tracker, because he knew that this was going to be the most painful thing for him to have to deal with. So I would say if finances aren't an issue and you want to just get this off your back, start with fewer titles. If they are an issue, it's probably you probably can afford to wait till you have like 15 or 20 titles, and then it'll really start to stress you out.
Yeah. So on this note, let's say a publisher has another service, like some other company, or let's say they've been doing it in Excel forever. Like, what is that process? Like, how easy is it to go from whatever other system they've been using to then switching it all to MetaComet?
That's a very good question, Christopher. And the answer is it's usually pretty easy. So the nice thing about being solely focused on this royalty piece is it's all that we think about. And one of the biggest challenges that people have is when we first started doing this 20 years ago, it would take us months to get a customer up and running because it just seemed like there were so many moving parts. Over 20 years and 200 customers, we've really nailed it down. Every year we get 1 or 2 royalty emergencies where someone says, I got royalties due next week, I don't know what to do. And they have 1,000 titles and we've been able to get them up and running. So we have really easy ways to import your data. We have it's a checklist that we hold your hand through every step. And we'll tell you, we know, you probably don't know because you've never implemented a royalty system, but we've done 200 of these. So we know all the steps you're going to have to go through, and we just hold your hand through each of those steps. So get your data in there, do a test run. Here are the things you should be looking for in the test run. Does it look good? Okay, great. And then everyone's a little nervous the first time they send out their statements. So we usually sit on the phone with them while they hit the send button to send their statements out. So it doesn't really matter what system you're in. We can get you up and running usually. As I mentioned at the beginning, it might take about 20 hours of total effort. And usually we can spread that out. Usually we say take 3 months to get up and running because you have other stuff going on in your business. But we can get you up and running. Some customers can get up and running just like 6 or 7 hours so of effort on their side.
And I know you have more to go to. I just one last question. So we have there. We talked about the other royalty programs. So I just wanted to see. You mentioned that, for example, something that's really great about MetaComet is that you're specifically focused on royalties. Just you don't have to name any names. I'm not looking for you to trash your competitors, but I'm just interested. Can you just tell us, are any other things that make MetaComet kind of stand out, or like things that your system does really well that maybe would be a reason they would sign up with you all specifically?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're the only ones that just focus on this problem. There are other royalty systems out there that are part of other systems, like it may be combined rights and royalties management. There's some combined like title management and royalty systems. There's a couple of those out there. Those companies are good at one thing, and it doesn't tend to be royalties. You know, the royalties is an afterthought. It's an add-on to them, and they just don't. None of them have nearly as many customers as us that do royalties. They just don't have the experience. They don't invest the effort into it like we do. And so the result of that is, I mentioned earlier, we very rarely hit a situation where someone has a need that we can't handle right out of the box. And that's because of our focus and specialty in this. Nobody can get you up and running in a week. I mean, again, we usually say take 3 months, but we're the only ones that can do that. We get you up and running so much quicker and smoother because we just have a standard process down. And we can integrate with all those other systems. You know, like there's you know, some of our competitors out there, some of whom are IBPA members, they have a royalty module. But again, it's a module. And if you're really looking to be efficient, you know, it's an afterthought for them. And for us, it's the core of what we do. So that's really, it's that focus, which results in the efficiencies that no one else can provide, and both in getting up and running and in how easy it is to get your royalties out the door every month, every quarter.
Great. Well, we have some other questions, but I'm going to let you get back to it.
Okay.
Later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So let me hit the share again. Okay. So the fourth question I said we'd answer for you is, you know, what will it do for you, and what are the benefits? Really, what are the benefits? And the main benefit is that every royalty period is going to be really quick and easy for you to get your royalties out the door. Once you have those initial titles and agreements loaded up, all you have to do is load your sales data in, and we basically just handle almost everything for you. I will show you, and it just eliminates the stress, and it just eliminates that time consumingness. It makes it so that it's just a simple back office operation that you have to do depending on how often you have to do it. So again, you get all your sales in, and we're going to show you exactly what issues you have with your sales. So you don't have to futz around and try and figure out why things aren't coming out right, or you may not even know they're not coming out right. If there's an issue, so this is what we call our sales reconciliation report. After you load your sales data in, we're going to immediately process it, and it happens very quickly, usually within seconds. And then you can run this report. It'll show you every sale you ingested in, and if there's a problem, it'll highlight it in this status column, and we'll tell you exactly what the problem is, so you can really easily fix it. This no matching term, this just means we haven't entered in the rules for audiobooks. So you go to this title, the Royalty Management Operations Guide, add in the rule for audiobooks, and boom, this is automatically reprocessed. You don't have to do anything else. You'll come back and run this report, and it will say royalties calculated. The other issue that you may encounter is no matching ISBN. So you import a sale, it wasn't in that list of ISBNs, so we don't know what title it belongs to. Just add that ISBN to the appropriate title. You come back here, and it will show royalties calculated. So, so it just makes, and this is part of what takes the stress away. One of the stresses is, are all my sales being accounted for? You run this report, and you'll see, oh, yes, they're all being accounted for. Another thing that really helps, this is one of our most popular reports. Most of our customers call it the month-end report because it gets automatically generated every month. In Royalty Tracker, it's called the Statement Balances report. And it just shows you for every title, it shows you for the current period, whether there was a prior balance, whether there were, how much royalties were earned. So let's say this is a 6-month period. This will build up over the 6-month period, any advances and adjustments, any reserves, and then finally, how much do you owe? And the great thing is, if you just want peace of mind, you can just pull up the royalty statement and compare all your royalty statements to this number here. And then if you go into this report, we have a report that will validate all these numbers. So you say, okay, I want to do a self audit just to be sure, or maybe my author is auditing me and I want to be sure. Let's pull up the reserve report, go into the guide to simple royalty management. Oh yeah, those numbers match these numbers. Let's pull up the adjustments report. Oh yeah, those numbers precisely match these numbers. Let's pull up the sales reconciliation report. Oh yeah, all those sales that came in, yep, they use the appropriate rule from the contract and they all add up to this number here. So all our reports tie together. So it makes it really easy for you to have that confidence. And that confidence is what gets rid of the stress, because you're stressed out usually because you're just not sure you're doing it right. And also because it takes time, but you're just not sure you're doing it right. So then the last part is, the royalty statements. When you're ready to send out your statements, it's so easy to do in Royalty Tracker. You just push a button, and assuming you have the emails for your statements, they all get distributed to your authors. We have a dozen different statement templates, different layouts you can use to share your royalty information with your authors. This is our most popular one. It puts your logo here in the top left, the name of your company here, your author's information. It shows the royalty period. And then for each type of sale, some of you may just have one type of sale. All sales pay 10%. Or 50% or whatever it is. Some of you will break your sales out by, format. Some of you will break it out by channel. Whatever your rules are, this will break it out in the same way so that your authors can see what you sold and what your royalty rate is. And then on the second page, it'll show, it'll total up your royalties. So if there are any reserve activities, it'll show all the advances. And then typically we'll show the life to date total so they can see for each ISBN on this title, how much have they earned over the course of the book. And this is optional. Some of our customers don't put this in. It's basically, it's kind of like a switch. We can take it out. But it's important to know that we have a lot of different versions of the royalty statement. So if you don't like this version, we probably have a version that'll work better for you. And then finally, at the bottom of the statement, you can put in any kind of a custom message, and you can change it every royalty period. So you'll usually want to put your contact information in case they have a question, but you can put in things like, hey, you want to get your email electronically, send us your email address, or check out our new website. Any kind of message you want, you can put in there. Just keeping an eye on time. I want to make sure we have some time for questions at the end. I'm just going to keep plowing through here. So that last question that I said we'd address at the beginning was can you afford this? And I like to throw it back when people ask me that is, can you not afford it? Again, it comes down to how do you value your time? How do you put a cost and on that stress that you're feeling with your royalties? Because if you're not feeling that stress, then maybe you don't need a system, but a lot of you are feeling that stress, and that's why you're on this webinar today, because it's stressful just not knowing, or you're dreading, oh crap, royalties are coming up next week and I got to deal with that. So how much value do you put on taking that stress out of your life? And then how much value do you put on eliminating the risks? Like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. I'm probably making some mistakes. In terms of the cost, so I'll talk a little bit about the actual cost numbers now. So our base price, so we charge a monthly fee. So our base price starts at 50 titles. So for up to 50 titles, we charge $350 a month. Now, as an IBPA member, you get a 10% discount on that, which brings it down to $315 a month. That's the most common price for our IBPA members. There's some big IBPA members, then the price goes up to, we have customers paying us $7,000 a month. But for most IBPA members, they're paying $315 a month, or the next tier is a little bit more than that. And then there's a one-time setup fee. The normal price is $1,000. But we, as an IBPA member, that goes down to 800. And then one thing we're offering is for everybody that's on the webinar today, if you sign up by July 31st, as Christopher mentioned, we're going to give you your first 2 months for free. So this is what most of our customers tell us, that they save 90% on their royalty effort. We have this one customer. This was one of those royalty emergencies I was telling you about. It's funny, we had 2 of these like back-to-back months during COVID. They both had 1,000 titles. They were just under 1,000 titles. One of them, I mean, they were both spending a ridiculous amount of time, but one of them, the founder of the company, she was spending 160 hours, a full-time job, just doing royalties every month. So she could barely do the stuff it took to run the business. Royalties had consumed her. I remember when I love this story, we got on the phone with her when it's time to send them out. We said, okay, just push the send button. I didn't show you guys this, but there's a button that just says send. And she couldn't believe how simple it was. And now she spends less than a day a month doing royalties. So, going back to eReads, one of the neat things about eReads is they were acquired a while back, and so we lost them as a customer, but then the company that acquired them, Open Road, became a customer. So we actually now still have our original customer. But royalties became a thing when we started working with that first customer, eReads, that they just didn't have to worry about it anymore. I will stop in a minute to take any questions, but I want to finish the slide parts with this. If you have any questions at all, or if you're interested in learning more about it, Rachel Rigdon is our director of sales. So she's the person to reach out to if you're interested in learning more. But I'm also happy to talk to any of you. So please feel free to reach out to me. Here's just a summary of the member benefit. And if you happen to not be a member, because I know IBPA opened this up to non-members, it's so worth joining. We've been members for years. IBPA PubU is an awesome event every year. The benefits alone easily pay for themselves. So I am now going to stop sharing. Do you know if any more questions came in?
No, I mean, you did a really great job of explaining everything, and so the main questions are we've done them all. I mean, I can tell you that we do have members who get overwhelmed by royalties, and so having a member benefit like this is very helpful. So we're grateful that we're working with you all on this, and we know our members. We've done surveys, and MetaComet's one of those that always gets like very high marks with people who are using it. So thank you for offering it to our members.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a real honor for us to be a part of the IBPA. I would say of all the organizations we belong to, IBPA is the largest group that uses Royalty Tracker. We have dozens of IBPA members that use our system. Great group to work with, great group to be a part of. And Christopher, thank you for letting us be a part of it. It's been an honor and a pleasure today. And again, reach out to me anytime, anybody, if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm gonna stop the recording, and we just greatly appreciate you all for coming. And again, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me and or David and his team. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Christopher.